ordinary meaning. You see? So as soon as we start discussing ontology and stuff like that, of course, everybody's just going to go unconscious. What to speak of consciousness? Consciousness itself is tremendously misunderstood. Tremendously misunderstood. People assume that it's an effect, when actually it's not. It's a quality. What's the difference? I could be mean and say, look it up. But an effect is produced by a cause. It's the object of some action. Like, for example, I have this book here. And this book is an effect of a printing press. It's also an effect of an author. See? The whole process goes way, 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 way back to the original author, like 500 years ago, when this book was first written. And then comes down through the lineage, is translated into English by Srila Prabhupada. Then one of his disciples edits it, then they type it up, then they have it typeset, then they send it to the printer, then it gets printed up, it gets bound, sent back, then they distribute it, and like that. It's a whole long series of causes and effects culminating in this object. So this is an object. Therefore, it's an effect. The only object that is not an effect is Krishna. Krishna is the original cause, sarva karana karanam, the original cause of everything. He's the cause of all other causes. So, other than Krishna, everything else is an effect of something, or probably more likely a series of things, a series of causes. But each and every object has certain qualities. And these qualities are not effects, they're intrinsic to the object. What does intrinsic mean?
A vital part of?
Yes. Well, take the mic.
A vital part of.
Yes, that's correct. You've been reading your
dictionary.
The book is blue. That's a quality of the book. Without the blue color, it wouldn't be the same book. It would be a red book or a green book. So the color blue helps us to define the nature of the object. It's intrinsic. Makes the thing what it is. A quality is different from a cause or an effect because it's intrinsic. It comes along with the object, whereas the cause is somewhere else. The printing press that printed this book is far away, somewhere else. See? So, qualities are intrinsic. Causes are extrinsic, outside of the object. Ex means outside. Okay. So, consciousness is intrinsic to the living being, the living entity. Whenever you have something that's alive, a living being, a person, even an animal or a plant, that being possesses consciousness as a quality, as an attribute, as an intrinsic part of its nature. If it didn't have consciousness, it wouldn't be alive. Consciousness and life always appear together. Why? Because they're both qualities of a spirit soul. Now, a spirit soul is not an ordinary thing. A spirit soul is a transcendental entity, a living entity. Okay? You can't measure it, you can't see it, you can't draw a picture of it, weigh it, or put it in a bottle. A living entity is something that is non-material by its very nature. So the living entity has, however, has all these symptoms: consciousness, life, personality, individuality, and so on. We've been over this a million times. What does it mean? It means that all of these qualities are inseparable from the living being, just like the color is inseparable from the book. You can't say that the living being is the cause of those qualities. No, the qualities are embedded in the living being. It can't be separated from him. Just like you couldn't separate the blue quality from this book without like tearing the book apart, and that wouldn't be a book anymore. So similarly, you can't separate the consciousness from the living entity. You can't separate personality and identity and individuality from the living entity. These are all intrinsic qualities. So whenever you have any symptoms of life, you know that you have a living entity. You know you have consciousness and all the other things that go with it. Karma, destiny, rebirth, everything that goes along with material existence for the spirit soul is also going to be present in that living entity. So also you're going to find a quality called ignorance. And this quality is not an intrinsic part, but is a covering. Like if I take this book and then I put a book jacket over it with a different color or a different picture on it, then the original quality of the book would be covered over, and then it would appear to have a different quality, but only temporarily, because the cover actually isn't part of the book. So similarly, the living entity, when he appears in the material world, gets covered over by this quality called ignorance. Actually, it's three qualities: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And these three qualities, or gunas, guna means mode or quality, are the different attributes of material nature. I mean, material nature has many, many different qualities, but they are all roughly categorizable into three: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So when the living being becomes covered by either of these, or any of these, or any combination of them, then he's in material consciousness. And the symptom of material consciousness is that one also is covered by a material body. And the material body also has these qualities. So the consciousness can have qualities of goodness, passion, or ignorance, and also the body can have the qualities of goodness, passion, or ignorance. And the person then lives or leads an existence reflecting those qualities of consciousness which are manifest in the body. A person can change their body. The body changes every 7 years. So if even someone, let's say, deeply in the mode of ignorance, were to begin to only perform activities and eat foods and perform worship and so forth in the mode of goodness, then within 7 years they could completely change their body to the mode of goodness. But in practice, we see that this hardly ever happens, because these qualities inherent in the body of the spirit soul and in the mind and in the consciousness, or applied over the consciousness, have a certain momentum. And they prevent us from seeing how to change to another kind of quality. So even if we want to take up the spiritual path, we have the momentum of so many years of wrong living, so many years of ignorance, or maybe even lifetimes of ignorance, before we can change our ways and purify this body and make it into a fit vehicle for spiritual life. So it's a long, slow process. 7 years is the bare minimum that it would take to go from the typical materially conditioned state to become a pure devotee. And it would require a very strict discipline during the whole 7 years. And very few people are capable of this. So realistically, we're talking about maybe 20, 30 years of work to become a pure devotee. This is just empirically derived. I think it's possible, if a person were properly prepared, for them to attain self-realization in a very short time, like 6 months. But the rub is in the qualifications. Properly prepared, what does that mean? See, that means that they've already purified their body, they already have adequate knowledge of the process, they already have a very clear idea of the goal they're trying to attain and the methods for attaining it. So in that case, then if they had just the right circumstances, maybe they could perform the task in 6 months. I had an experience like that. But that was after like 30 years of preliminary work. So this path is very, very substantial. It's a big piece of work. And not many people get to do it. Most people aren't qualified. Most people don't last long enough to really get the result. Or they accept a partial result. For example, Krishna describes in Bhagavad-gītā 4 kinds of pious men who approach him.